Travis Hunter is fresh off a Heisman victory. He's probably going to go in the top 5 of the NFL draft. Where does he rank all time in college football stars?
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. This episode is brought to you by the College Football Playoffs. The College Football Playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The College Football Playoff, presented by Allstate, begins with 4 first-round games December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. We're also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcast. And who doesn't love free things? And who doesn't love Pete Sousa of ESPN and Inside the 12? Pete, I appreciate you for joining us. You're going to be talking with me navigating Travis Hunter's legacy, Deion Sanders' first year in the Big 12, and just the Big 12 in general. But we got to start off with Travis Hunter because he just won the Heisman, obviously. It was a little closer than I think most people expected. I think it was the closest Heisman race since around 2009-ish, I believe it was. Beats out Ashton Genty. What is your overall thoughts of Travis Hunter, right? You got to watch him firsthand as a member of the Big 12 media. What did you think about him?
Well, I mean, I was absolutely blown away. Generational talent, as someone who is – there's so many special things about Travis Hunter outside of his skill set, right, which led to 1,100 receiving yards, 4 interceptions, right? Like, think about that. I just mentioned 1,100 receiving yards and 4 interceptions. And, like, I got a name for you. This is crazy. It just came to mind. Like, when I was a kid, there was this dude who played at Holy Cross. I'm from Philadelphia. And his name was Gordy Lockbaum, and he was actually a Heisman Trophy candidate. He went to the ceremony in New York. He played both ways, and he dominated playing both ways. But this was at Holy Cross, dude. Like, tell me where Holy Cross is. Like,
I want to say Connecticut.
I think I somewhere up there in the Northeast. I should know. You don't have to know. I should know.
Very easy. I know that.
Yeah, being where I'm from. But so now we're talking about a guy who is elite on both sides of the ball. I think we did this. We were breaking it down when he won the Heisman, and I'm not breaking any news to anybody, but like he played like 80% of the Buffs snaps this year, or some crazy number like that. Charles Woodson is a guy who more modern day you can think about, or I think about when you talk about Travis Hunter. But if you look at what Charles Woodson actually did on the field, phenomenal body of work in the college, and he's an NFL Hall of Famer, but he didn't play nearly as much as Travis Hunter did on the defensive end. And returning kicks, of course, you can ignite change in a game, but the opportunities and being on the field just doesn't come with the repetition and the opportunities that if you're playing on the defensive side of the ball along with offense too. So when I think of Travis Hunter, I just think of a generational talent, and I think of someone who, again, I started by saying there's so much that goes into his package, right? But you got to credit Deion almost as much as you credit Travis Hunter. Like, we live in a society, and you can get down this rabbit hole with like group think, right? And like what everybody we go with the flow, dude, more often than not. You know, I don't want to use any like wild terms like we're all sheep or something like that. It's not what I mean, but like it is a copycat sport, football is. And a guy playing at the Big 12 level in a conference like that, in a team that barely missed the playoff, dude, right? Like barely was in the upper echelon of the college football elite this year. Deion believed in Travis Hunter and gave him the opportunity to play both ways. That's unheard of. Right. So it starts at the top, dude. And Deion's belief in Travis Hunter leads to Travis Hunter's belief in himself. And that's why I think Colorado really is so special, and Deion is such a special leader, because there is a mentality and an inspiration that he passes on to his players that transcends the actual X's and O's of the game.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to touch on a couple things you talked about, because I went through and I didn't have the Holy Cross poll. That was a great one. I was going through like two-way players of recent memory, and it was like we had Jack Coletto, I think his name was, at Oregon State, who was like a fullback linebacker type of guy that they would bring in for like 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1. There was Miles Jack at UCLA, who was a linebacker and running back, but he was never both at the same time. Like, he was never the running back and the linebacker. It felt like he was either or. Adoree Jackson was another one. Jabril Peppers, he had a couple packages, but like Travis Hunter was legitimately a full-time player at 2 positions, which is insane to think about.
Yeah, it wasn't a gimmick. Like, it wasn't like we're going to put this guy on the field. So when Nebraska has to prepare for us, they have to keep in mind that they could come out and see Travis Hunter lined up at cornerback or a wide receiver. Like, no. He's going to play all the time. Like, I wonder too sometimes, like, I remember, again, predating the Kevin Borba era, but when I was a kid, I remember Dallas playing Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl and Deion playing wide receiver. I mean, Deion they would split him out, the Cowboys would, Jimmy Johnson, or at this point it was Barry Switzer, but he was never out there every down, but he was certainly a threat. And I sometimes wonder, you would have a better opportunity of talking to Deion about this than I would, but like, if it's almost like something he knew that he could have done himself and was never quite given the opportunity, but he believed that Travis could do it and saw it in him.
Yeah, I think Deion, Coach Prime, has that confidence to where I'm sure he probably thinks he could hop in the NBA and give you 10. He was just that kind of athlete, and he's just got that kind of that confidence, right?
Which, by the way, watching the NBA these days, he probably could if he has a strong mid-range jumper because nobody's looking for it.
Just jack up a few threes and you'll be at 9 points by the third quarter. Let's talk about you made the Charles Woodson comparison, and I think that's where a lot of people go to, because obviously Charles Woodson is the closest thing we have. Like, I read a story after the Heisman. It was like Travis Hunter is the first two-way player since Charles Woodson to win the award, and I was like, kind of, I guess. I was like, Charles Woodson technically did play a little bit of offense. We'll pretend that's a thing. I like to think about it in these all decades teams. So like ESPN every once in a while will drop like the teams of the 90s, the teams of the 2000s, the 2010s. So right now we're the 2020s. So let's just say in 2030, when this rolls around, Travis Hunter has to be on there, right? And he has to be on there twice, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. To be on there twice is almost mind-boggling. And I would almost say it almost couldn't happen because, again, it's almost like you got to put your brain back together and get it back on your head to think that somebody could be on an all-decade team twice. Is pretty much unheard of, but it is a real possibility. And when you think about a grander scale, right, guys who transcended the game, I would even think, because now you got me thinking, we mentioned, I threw the guy's name Gordy Lockbaum in there, but I'm proud of myself for that one. I just thought of that. That's pretty good. But Bo Jackson, now he didn't play both ways, but he played 2 sports, and he played Major League Baseball. That ended up being what his career, he ended up playing baseball because he hurt his hip playing football, because football is just such a brutal sport. But had Bo Jackson not gotten hurt playing for the Raiders, and I think it was a divisional playoff game against Cincinnati in 1990, a hip injury, which he never recovered from, because initially they thought it was a hip pointer, but it was much worse. It was like there was all kinds of ligament damage, and it slowed down this person who was like a superhero. And Bo Jackson is one of the players, because, before we got on here, we talked about players you'll tell your kids about. Players like Travis is in that category that honestly, and people my age, I'm not that old, but people like in their 40s, early 40s would say, oh my gosh, like nobody compares to Bo Jackson. But if you really think about it, like Travis Hunter, in my opinion, does, because we're talking about college football right now. And we're talking about elite competitors. I don't know what Travis will do in the NFL. He's certainly going to be a top 10 pick, right, at the very least. And so he'll have the opportunity. I'm dying to see what he does. I'm so excited. But I think it's not out of the realm of possibility, although some folks might be like, oh, get off my lawn with it, to compare him to a Bo Jackson, somebody who – because you go down that list of Heisman winners, and as much as there are exciting players like Travis Hunter and Charles Woodson – and Johnny Manziel, who you mentioned before we started, there's a lot of like Gino Torrettas and like, God bless him, but Vinny Testaverde. I'm going in on old Miami quarterbacks, but like I guess it was White from Oklahoma. A lot of guys who are just become afterthoughts in the NFL because maybe they were system quarterbacks or system players. But Travis Hunter jumps out and grabs you. He grabs you by the shirt collar. And he says, look at me, pay attention to me. And you have to keep your eyes on him.
Yeah, and I think I had Caroline Fenton on from Yahoo Sports the other day, and we kind of like tossed out names of like generational players that we would tell our kids about, and you start thinking of like popular players, right? Like you would think of someone like I don't know, Jalen Hurts or Tua in college, and it's like neither of those guys. I'm not going to tell my kids about them, right? Maybe I'll tell them about the Tua moment in the championship. Like Trevor Lawrence, same thing. Like he had a nice moment, and so when we got down to it, it was like Johnny Manziel because I mean the dude's out here at frat parties doing shenanigans off the field. And
Shenanigans,
then the nice way of putting it. And then doesn't watch any film. And then he just comes out, torches Alabama.
Yeah.
Reggie Bush was the one that she suggested, which I thought was a great one because I think Reggie was kind of a before his time kind of guy. And then I think another one she said was Joe Burrow. And granted, she was an LSU. I think she was an LSU grad for sure, but she did cover LSU. Joe Burrow's 1 year at LSU was phenomenal. And so when you start thinking of like generational talents, I actually think that we as a society, to go back to the old man yells at cloud kind of vibe here, I think we throw that word around too much. But I think in the case of Travis Hunter, it fits absolutely perfect.
It does. And we just mentioned like when you try to pare it down and find those guys, it's hard to find when you really get efficient about it. Like it's hard to find guys like Travis Hunter when you go back in and search the history books. It just is. And honestly, Kev, I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like I am not running an NFL front office, but I can tell you that Ashton Genty would not be my first pick in the NFL draft. He just wouldn't be. I'm not going to say he's overrated. He's an exciting player. He is, in my opinion, he is no Barry Sanders. So that comparison to me sort of fell short. Like Barry Sanders was a guy, dude, when I was real little, he was having that season in 1988. And that really was like appointment viewing. It was like, that was back in the days where not every single game was on TV, but like Barry Sanders games were. And he took that Oklahoma State team, similar to what Ashton Genty is doing. He put that team on his back. Like in that 88 season, or maybe it was 89, but one of those 2 years, like Oklahoma State probably would have made a 12-team playoff, right? But back then they ended up playing in like the Liberty Bowl or the Aloha Bowl, and that's it. But Barry Sanders, I believe, like in the same mold as Ashton Genty, but way better. And the reason I bring that up is because I was surprised that, you hear about that it was a closer vote. I thought, and maybe I'm just a Big 12 apologist. I don't think so because I know college football pretty well. I had decided in my mind, and we were, not that it's like this major platform, but I went on the record on Inside the 12, the show we do for the Big 12. And I said, there's no way this guy's not winning the Heisman. And this was like in week 8. And honestly, we had people, the powers that be were like, hey, don't talk about that. It's like too soon. I'm like, no, like this is going down, you know? And I wanted to put my name on it because I truly authentically believed it. And, I don't have a crystal ball, but I had a pretty good feeling. And it wasn't that I wasn't splitting atoms saying that Travis Hunter was going to win the Heisman.
Yeah, and I think before we move on to touch on the sort of debate, we saw early on in the season, once there was no quarterbacks, like I think once Quinn Ewers sort of got injured, because I feel like he was the only clear quarterback at a time. It was like a year ago that we were talking about this moment. But after that Michigan win, it was Quinn Ewers' award, it felt like. And so you move on, and there was no quarterbacks that really stood out. And I think that was the key for Travis and Ashton to win the award. But there was just like and I said this as well. And I said, Travis will win the Heisman if Ashton doesn't break the record in the regular season, because that's what it comes down to. I think he's going to end up playing more games. And I'm also not sure if he's going to end up breaking the record at all, because obviously Boise State is playing Penn State or SMU. They both have top 10 run defenses. Yeah. So good luck. I really hope he does it because I don't know if anyone else.
He's like 130 yards away, right?
Yeah, he's close. So it's possible. It just would take a lot. And so I think it was kind of obvious to me that Travis is going to win it. I do feel like there's a Deion Sanders sort of like fatigue that came within. That's why some people didn't want to vote for Travis. And I also think that weird snap count argument like really got like a hold of some people. And they're like, he just plays a lot of snaps. And they're like, that doesn't mean anything. And I was like, okay. He's playing full games. He's dominating. Yeah, it was a ridiculous argument. And I think the worst part about this whole Heisman race is that it turned Travis and Ashton Genty into like, it was a competition between the two. And it wasn't like who do you think's going to win? It's like, this guy's good, this guy's not, or like this guy's accomplished, this guy's not. And I think that's the unfortunate part about it. But that's the life we live in with social media. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. And it was even a bummer because you and I get caught up in this and what we do, right? But it's like Ashton Genty, and look, ESPN's my employer, but Ashton Genty says, geez, I feel like I should have won. And then that's a headline. Like Ashton Genty says, I should have walked away with it. It's like, what do you want him to say? It's like he's a competitor. If you asked him, what do you think? What's he supposed to say? I suck. You know, like Travis Hunter's like hands down way better than me. But that's what we do. You read the headline and it was like top one on ESPN the next day. And it's like, it gives you the impression that he doesn't respect what Travis Hunter did. Right. So we all kind of, it's up to us to kind of weed through that stuff. And it's at the biggest levels in media.
Yeah, and especially we're seeing clips or like snippets. Like I think that was probably like a minute-long statement where it was just like the one part we saw was, I think I should have won. It's like this guy, and it's like, okay, he said a lot more than that. So that's just the social media era we live in. When we come back, we're gonna be talking about Deion Sanders' first year in the Big 12, how we thought he did, and what his future could be in the Big 12. But first, this episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. It's that time of the year. The College Football Playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports' coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset Texas, or the Texas Longhorns, in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. And we're back. I'm joined by Pete Sousa of ESPN and Inside the 12. Pete, let's talk about it. You have a front row seat to all of the whole Big 12, right? And so what did you think of Deion Sanders' first year in the Big 12? Let's start there.
Is that another one? All right,
What's
sorry.
that?
I had something going on my computer.
No, you're good. We're talking Deion Sanders in the Big 12. Pete, welcome.
So, all right. So, something popped up on my computer because I got 1,000 tabs open. So Deion's first season in the Big 12, I have to tell you, I was shocked by the level of success. I'm never shocked by what Deion Sanders does because I was a kid who grew up kind of at the foot of Deion Sanders, really respecting him. Not only I knew that Deion Sanders was an effective football coach, right? I really didn't know how good of a coach he was. I knew that there were people who were almost inherently opposed to Deion and Colorado because of the sizzle and a little bit of the in-your-face that Colorado brings to the party, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that almost like there was a point in the season where I was like, wait a minute, Colorado's not ranked in the top 25. Right. Like what's going on? Like
it took a long time.
Dude, that was egregious. Like, and I know people who vote, right? Like sports writers and stuff. And it's very regional. Like the fact of the matter is the Big 12 this year turned into like what the Pac-12 was, right? And so as a Colorado fan, right, you've maybe been living in that world for a while. Wow. But it was really, really in your face this year when you saw that teams like Colorado who were playing late night games for people living on the East Coast, they were just not getting to watch. I mean, think about if Colorado beats Kansas State, which they should have, right? I mean, they came so close.
Yeah,
I think Travis got hurt in that game, right?
He did. That was probably the reason he played 80% of the snaps, like you mentioned earlier, is probably because he missed 2 quarters of that one.
Yeah, think about that. So Travis, and anybody can say what it could have shown, but that's a game they really could have won. And if they win that game, they're certainly in the playoff and they'll be ranked in the top 25 or would have been a lot earlier. I believe there was a little bit of a prejudice against Colorado by some of the folks who voted in the top 25 or voted on these polls, because I just think that people were really, they didn't want to hand it over to Deion quite yet. Everybody kept saying, oh, well, you got to show us you can do it. You know, you got to really, it was like, well, he's showing you, this team is showing you every week out. And the Big 12, I was kind of bummed, towards the end of the season when they were talking about, the conference might not even get a bye and things had to kind of shake up so Arizona State would. But I was extremely impressed, I should say, by Deion's first season in the Big 12 and Colorado's success. After a couple games, it didn't. I realized, okay, these guys are for real. This is for real. I don't like to think I was late to the party, but I think it was a phenomenal coaching job, and I think that team, there's so much noise outside. I went to the University of Richmond, played football, scholarship. Like, I've been around football and sports for a long time. And there is a solitude among the team and the coaching staff, right? And a singleness of purpose that is harder to achieve nowadays with all the noise outside. And Deion Sanders and his ability, because last year, the end of the season was rough, right? I mean, after a great start, it was rough. And I think that people were waiting on this team to fail this year. And for them to stay together and achieve this goal of having this amazing season speaks so much to Coach Prime. And I think it's a future and an indication of what's to come with him. I don't think that he's anywhere near finished.
Yeah, I think people had fatigue from last year, and you could see it early on in the year, because when they lost that Nebraska game, it was like, oh my goodness, like the whole world was like, here we go again.
Yep.
And
100%.
I think the voters, it reminded me, it honestly seemed like we were grading Colorado based off of 2023 and 2024 together. And it was like, we're not going to rank them because last year they started strong and didn't finish well. And it's like, okay, you have to throw that out. It's the same thing with the playoff, where you can't automatically just put Alabama in because they were good last year or whatever it is. And so I totally agree with your point there. You kind of hinted at his future in the Big 12. Let's go right to that. I think there was a lot of questions, and I guess technically there still is a question. Like, will he leave? Will he blah, blah, blah? We'll have to wait and see. He said about infinite amount of times that he doesn't want to go to the NFL. Assuming he stays at Colorado, where do you see the trajectory of this program going in a conference where, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't feel like there's a face of a face of the conference yet. And I feel like he could be that.
Oh, I think he already is, really. I think you have to look at Kenny Dillingham and what Arizona State has done this year is absolutely unbelievable and undeniable. And really cool to see if they can have success in the college football playoff. Like, that's a pretty easy story to get behind. But when you peel that back, I think it's Colorado. Utah, they kind of took it on the chin this year. And it's not Kyle Whittingham's fault that his fan base is like a lot of college fan bases. And that's why they call fans, me, you, whoever, fanatics. Like we're pretty intense. And, Utah going into the Big 12 and they're like, oh, it's not, give me a break. You know what I mean? Like, look at where you ended up. And I think that the sustainability of what Coach Sanders has figured out, how to work the portal, how to work NIL, and players. Bill Belichick just went to North Carolina pretty much, and he's working on this. He's working on the mindset and recruiting players that will be an NFL operation. We'll get you to the NFL, much like Coach Calipari did at Kentucky, right? Like, we got the most guys drafted in the first round. We got the most all-stars. It's a pretty good argument, and to get guys to come to your school. Well, Coach Prime can do the same exact thing. So that they'll continue to get amazing. And dude, you've been to Boulder. I mean, who doesn't want to go to school there? It's not, Bill McCartney years ago, I've gotten a chance to work many college football games with Chad Brown, who played defense for Colorado. He's an amazing linebacker, started all 4 years on a team that won the national championship, shared a piece of it. And I think once Coach McCartney kind of broke down that wall and got guys from inner city schools to come and play, guys from LA to come play in Colorado and understand how awesome it is there. I think since then, like, the secret's been out about how cool of a place it is. And it's just a matter of who's there to get the talent to play for Colorado. And who else would you rather play for than Coach Prime? So I think his success is limitless. I really do. And I think he did a wonderful job hiring guys to work for him, right, that were able to manage the game. Pat Shurmur did an amazing job with the offense. The guy whose name is escaping me from the Bengals, defensive coordinator,
Robert Livingston.
Robert Livingston did an amazing job weathering the storm, too, early on when they were giving up a lot of points. So I think there's so many indications the way that he manages his staff, the way that he recruits his players, and the way that guys play for him under the brightest of lights, I don't see any reason to think that he won't be successful for a very long time to come.
Yeah, and I think part of his strategy maybe, and it was kind of frowned upon, his portal strategy, and I still am interested to see how it works in year 3 now. But he's really committed to it, and it kind of made me chuckle today. I saw this report about Bill Belichick, and it was like Bill Belichick's building his team through the transfer portal with NFL coaches and NFL mindset. It was like Deion Sanders said he was doing the same thing, but obviously, I guess it's different when it's Bill Belichick, right?
Dude, 100,000%, and that's the thing. They people still think, I'm telling you, like it or not, they still think of Deion Sanders as like just be the money, or must be the money, like 1993 Deion, and that ain't what it is. Right. It's not what it is at all. And so I think people are learning that that's not what it is, and whether they like it or not, it's hitting them over the head.
Yeah, I think, and he showed them the proof this year, right? The first year was kind of a vision; it didn't work out. This year is the proof, and so now we're going to see if he can continue to sustain that success. Speaking of the success, the Big 12 Conference, it had some success this year. We're going to talk about that when we come back, but first we're going to hear a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This episode of Locked On Buffs is also brought to you by our sponsors over at PrizePicks. And let me tell you about PrizePicks. It's a fun place to go win some money. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long, with PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. You can make your holidays bigger and brighter with PrizePicks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Like I said, college football playoffs coming up. Maybe go look at a quarterback to throw interceptions. Quinn Ewers, really good quarterback, always throws an interception a big game. It happens. I've seen it firsthand twice. I was at the Georgia game. I was at the Cotton Bowl last year. He's done it twice. So maybe peep that against Clemson. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, to get $50 instantly after you play your $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Okay, me and Pete are back, and we're talking about the new Big 12. Pete has a nice view of the conference from an overall landscape, so he sees everything and every single crevice. How do you think this year went for the Big 12 in terms of, we'll go success-wise, we'll go brand-wise, and then we'll go college football playoff-wise?
Well, success-wise, it was disappointing. I mean, when you think about, I think it was surprising but disappointing. And the reason I bring it up is because you had marquee teams like Utah who just completely, it was like, wait, what happened? Oklahoma State, like what? Mm-hmm. And so those were powers. You know, a lot of times you will have teams rise from the ashes like Arizona State, but you'll still have your quote unquote powerhouses sustain success at the top of the conference. That did not happen for the Big 12. So unfortunately, success-wise, it was like it left a little to be desired. I mean, when you have a team that is predicted to finish last in your conference, finish first, it's a little you're going to be left with more questions than answers probably at the end of the season. But the big answer, or the big question that Arizona State can answer, is if they can keep this going. You know, it's kind of TBD, really. I can rephrase that success-wise, because if Arizona State can put together a run, which I truly believe they can, I think that getting that bye and not having to play, you know, at Penn State on the road in 25-degree weather is much different. Now they're in a situation where they're going to play in a dome, you know, in their first game, and either way they'll go from there. They'll either be in a dome or in a nice weather stadium for the rest of their run, which I think sits like really, really sets up well for them. So I think success is TBD. Branding, I think you won't find a better conference that brands as well as the Big 12 does. I truly believe that. I used to work in the NBA. I did PR for the Sixers and for the Hornets. And that was my first kind of when Brett Yormark kind of came on my radar. And right away, everything he was affiliated with was like a rocket ship. And now the Big 12 is on board like the Brett Yormark rocket ship. And the thing about a guy like Brett Yormark is he will ultimately, like, I have no clue what his future is, but he's going to leave the Big 12 better than it was before he got there. I mean, Kev, we're talking about Colorado being in the Big 12. Well, if the Pac-12 didn't blow everything up and screw that whole situation up, we probably wouldn't, you and I wouldn't be talking right now, Right. And so that has a lot to do with Brett Yormark and being quick on the draw with television deals and sponsorship deals. And now here we are. And so I think it was a disappointing year success-wise on the field. I don't know that people in the Big 12 would admit that, but I think for me, that's how I feel. If Arizona State can really put a run together, it would be seen as a success, X's and O's wise. But branding wise, I don't think you can find a better conference in the country that brands itself as well as the Big 12 does. It's an amazing thing to be a part of.
Yeah, and I think to hit on the Arizona State point, I think, and I wrote a story for Athlon the other day, and I think this kind of ties in. I wrote the 4 people under the most pressure in the college football playoff, and it was Ryan Day, because obviously it feels like somehow he's on the hot seat, even though he's won 50-something games, but he keeps losing the most important game, which is to Michigan. It was Quinn Ewers, not because of the Arch Manning thing, but because he has a chance to really solidify Texas as being back. Like, he brought them back. Now, can he bring them back to being a national championship contender? And also, his NFL draft stock took a hit this year. We'll just be honest. James Franklin, because he can't win the big game. And then the last one was Ashton Genty. And it wasn't because he's chasing the record. It's more so because Ashton Genty is representing 64 teams right now, in the sense of he's representing the group of 5. And so every group of 5 team is hoping that Boise State wins. So that way there's not a discussion where they expand the playoff and they go, maybe the group of 5 should do their own thing. And so Arizona State kind of feels like that, where they're representing the Big 12. And so the Big 12, probably more than anyone outside of Boise State, out of the SEC, the Big 10, the ACC, the Big 12 needs a win here, right? Yeah. I think them beating Texas or Clemson, whoever it ends up being, would move mountains for the conference. Because as we saw when the rankings were coming out, it was, is the Big 12 even going to get in? Is the Big 12 going to get a top 4 seed? Like, the Big 12, I think, like you said, because of their disappointing play, they learned they don't have a lot of room for error.
Yeah, no, and you don't. And there's so much competition out there when you get towards the top of college football, which is nothing new. But yeah, like no real room for slippage. And a couple of years ago, when it would be like, okay, Arizona State won the Big 12 championship, and now they're going to go and play in the Fiesta Bowl, right? Like a New Year's Day Bowl, but not in the college football, the 14 playoff. It sort of would be like, okay, like the Big 12, not everything went their way this year, but let's get back to it next year. This year, it's more on display than ever, because it's like, are you going to make the 12-team playoff? How many teams of yours are going to make the 12-team playoff? So Arizona State really coming on at the end of the season like they did and winning convincingly like they did, ending up getting a bye, was like a huge win for the conference, because now everyone more than ever, and that's, you could talk about all the crazy stuff going on in college football and the portal and blah, blah, blah. But like we're sitting here with the 12-team playoff getting ready to start on Saturday. And I know you just got engaged. I love my girlfriend. I'm just trying to figure out how I can keep the relationship together over the course of the next like 4 or 5 days, because there's so much awesome football going on. When you include college football and the NFL, I'm going to have to make sure I get ahead of stuff, right? And get all the good stuff out of the way for her so I can hunker down and watch some football.
I think that might be the most challenging part of the college football season. I broke it down to her, and this was my way of not explaining football to her, but it was like, there's 15 to 17 weeks of college football. I was like, I just need a little over 2 weeks to just watch football, right? Like, when you put it that way, it's 17 days out of 365. I did not mention that the most important part of college football would occur during the most important part of the year, which is Thanksgiving, Christmas time. We're kind of learning as we go, but yeah.
How do you think I feel? I got to hop on planes and go call college basketball.
Yeah.
I'm working the phone as much as I can to stay available. That's the best I can do sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, we can only try. That's the world we chose. The sports world is not they don't care about holidays in the sports world. I don't know why. We need to. Can we work around it? Can we work around Christmas and Thanksgiving? But Pete, I appreciate you for joining us. Tell the people where they could find you and what else you're working on as you stay busy and try to stay in your girlfriend's good graces this holiday season.
All right, a couple of things you can always. I got a bunch of college basketball coming up for ESPN. I can't. I've called a bunch of games so far in the non-con, but Big 12 schedule. You'll see me calling a lot of games all over the Big 12 and some of the American Conference stuff. So I'm pumped for that. Also, inside the 12, you can catch it on. If you live in a Big 12 market like Denver or wherever, you'll see it there over the air on TV, but you can also see it on the Big 12 YouTube channel. I got my own show every day, the Pete Sousa Show. And something important, I've been sober for 13 years. I have a podcast called The Payoff with Pete. If you or yourself or anybody that's struggling, there's always hope. Check out this podcast called The Payoff with Pete, Stories of Sobriety. I promised myself if I ever got sober and I got a platform, I would share the message. So I'm trying to do that now.
And he's being humble. That podcast was Podcast of the Year. He deserves all the credit and all the praise for his accomplishment on that podcast. So congratulations on 13 years, you said, right?
Yeah, thanks, Kev. I appreciate it.
Congratulations on 13 years and congratulations on your success with the podcast. You guys know where you can find me. I'm all over the place. If you watch college football, there's a good chance I cover your team in one way or another. And we're over here on Locked On Buffs. I appreciate you guys for tuning in every single day. Make me your first listen. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share this with a friend. And everyone have a great day. See you guys tomorrow.